Fighting games have this little piece of black magic at their core that makes playing them online not only possible, but legitimately great. But before we had it, the future of fighting games online looked extremely bleak.
For the most part, if you're playing like a game that's popular, playing online is fine most of the time. You don't have the same kind of issues that you see in fighting games with delay-based netcode a lot of times. It's pretty crazy.
The craziest part? The person who came up with this revolutionary idea did it in his spare time because a port of his favorite fighting game completely sucked online. It's not a stretch to say that rollback netcode has completely changed the way that we think and, most importantly, feel about playing fighting games online.
I want to wake up and not have to think, I hope any of the 3 or 4 fighting games come out next year have good netcode. I'm literally asking for the game to be playable online.
So how the hell did it all happen? And why did it take so long?
The lag ate the stand block and made me dude, this lag straight up.
That's right, baby. Now I'm the guy in the nebulous green screen box who's here to talk about nerdy shit. So take a hike, Counter-Strike, Valorant, even you, League of Legends, because today we get to talk about some other games for a change. For decades, fighting games couldn't be played seriously over the internet. That wasn't always a big problem because live and in-person was exactly the way that fighting gamers preferred it. But modern games need online play. The problem was that fighting games just hadn't kept up.
For me, overall, Street Fighter V netcode is not 10 out of 10, but I would not have any qualms about saying that was a real match where it felt like the real game. Wow. You can't even write this shit. Look at me. I try to shill it for you, Capcom, and look what you do.
What the fuck? I don't know if anyone saw that. Did anyone catch that?
Today, a game that doesn't have good netcode might as well be dead on arrival. And thankfully for all of us, Capcom finally implemented quality rollback netcode in Street Fighter VI. Now, you can play matches against people who are pretty far away and still have a stable experience, as we discovered in our review of the game.
I went into one of the busiest Asian region lobbies and played against 2 players with over 200 ping that were likely in or around Japan. Sure, it was noticeably worse than a local NA connection, but it was honestly better or on par with anything that I would have expected back in Street Fighter V. In 5 or 6 games, I dropped less than 10 frames. To Japan. That's not good netcode, it's witchcraft.
It's no wonder that people were celebrating like the Galactic Empire was finally defeated, but Capcom took a long time to get here. Capcom and other developers didn't really focus on online play until very recently, and things were pretty bad.
How insane is it that there's not a fighting game in 2019 with perfect netcode, a working lobby system that just makes sense, really good training, like a robust training mode with good features, and a solid tutorial mode? These are all standard things that fighting games should contain in 2019.
So let's take a look back. Historically, fighting games have excelled in 2 huge arenas, at the arcade and on home consoles. The arcade was a central place to play the game, so networking wasn't a requirement. If you wanted to update an arcade machine, you did it the old-fashioned way. But by the late 90s, it was a lot more common to play fighting games online. 1998's NetFighter appears to be the earliest internet-compatible fighting game at release. But as the years went on, more and more games got online play. Unfortunately, it was pretty laggy. That didn't sit well with fighting game competitor and developer Tony Cannon, who realized that with arcades starting to disappear, online play might be the genre's lifeline. But he also understood how different fighting games felt online.
By introducing lag, it immediately makes the game not worth playing, especially for someone like me. Think about me and all of you guys. Like, you're in the arcade, you're building this skill for like 10 years, and then you're trying to play a game online that just throws it all out because your timing all changes.
More than real-time strategy or even FPS, fighting games online had to feel like the same thing everybody already knew and loved. So how did our boy Tony solve this problem? Well, I think I'll let the guy who actually knows what he's talking about handle this one.
And now, the guy who actually knows what he's talking about.
Wait, I still have to do this bit too? So when it comes to ping, the round-trip latency of your data from you to your destination, some games are simply more demanding than others. Fighting games measure things in frames. There are generally 60 of them every second, and being just 1 or 2 frames late can create a massive connectivity problem, as Canon explained at EVO 2017.
60 times a second, they're reading your joystick, and then they're running just a tiny bit of game state, 1/60th of a second, and then they're rendering the frame over and over and over again, right? And so the problem was at that, let me read the joysticks step, it has to get the remote packet over the network.
At first glance, this seems like a pretty serious problem. If the 2 game clients have to basically shake hands with each other or a server 60 times every second just to make sure they're on the same page, then the connection stability is going to be incredibly important.
If there's any reason why there's packet loss or a drop in the quality of the connection, you will have a bad experience. It will be noticeable, and if there's packet loss, the game will chug and freeze.
These games supported multiplayer, but they lagged, because essentially when you played someone, the longer it take to transmit traffic over the network, the more the game would lag.
It seemed plausible that eventually network speeds could support this model, but the fighting game community didn't have time to lose. This was pre-2009, and the feeling was that fighting games, at least in North America, were going to die with arcades. So instead of waiting, Canon developed Good Game Peace Out, a program that used an existing emulator, Final Burn Alpha, to run his new strategy for handling netcode. The basic idea was simple at its core, but revolutionary for the genre. What if, instead of trying to synchronize every frame, you just guess? And if you guess wrong, you catch the player back up.
This was the only way to make anything work with 0 frames of latency. If you really need to simulate and you don't have both inputs, well, I guess you just have to simulate.
The secret sauce in the formula was that the netcode kept tabs on the possible outcomes of the actions on screen, allowing the actions to be resimulated in the background, thus the name rollback.
So GGPO will ask the game, hey game, could you go back a few frames and then figure out what happened, sort of re-simulate?
This had other consequences. Like, for example, sometimes you missed out on a couple starting frames of an animation you should have been able to see. But that was obviously way better than the alternative. Constant lag, input delay, and synchronization problems that interfered with the ability to play at all. It's not hyperbole to say that Canon's idea changed fighting games forever. He started working on it in 2006 and got to demo it to Capcom later that year. Rollback-style netcode went on to be implemented in a number of fighting games, and in 2019, Canon made GGPO open source under the MIT license. But even though we had a great solution as early as 2006, we didn't have the same sense of urgency until 2020.
And that was the guy who actually knows what he's talking about.
So rollback worked remarkably well, but implementing it into existing games was a lot of work.
Just to give you guys a sense of the scope of what we were, the time we invested in shipping this thing was about 4 to 12 concurrent engineers for 9 months, roughly 7 or 8 man-years of work for the initial release, and then ongoing support is part-time work for about 6 engineers.
NetherRealm chose to implement rollback for Mortal Kombat 10 and Injustice 2, but you can see why some companies might have been a bit hesitant. The bottom line is, this was expensive. Was it worth it? The fans said yes, but the devs, well, wasn't exactly the sexiest addition to their games. Plus, at the moment, a lot of players had some other option, either arcades or maybe locals, which had a massive resurgence along with Street Fighter 4's genre-defining popularity. Street Fighter V launched in 2015 with a pretty bare-bones offering and 8 frames of input delay on PS4. Depending on the density of the player base where you lived, playing online could be a nightmare. In particular, one voice stepped up. Sajam, a legendary fighting game commentator. He was unapologetic in his criticism of bad netcode.
When it comes to fighting games, you know what I want? I want to wake up and not have to think. I hope any of the 3 or 4 fighting games come out next year have good netcode. I'm not asking for a battle pass. I'm not asking for $34 million prize pool. I'm literally asking for the game to be playable online. That's all I want. Something so small.
And those criticisms necessarily extended to Capcom because Street Fighter V had plenty of problems. Some games had decent netcode, from older games like Killer Instinct to newer games like Guilty Gear Strive. But Sajam was clear, we needed to start demanding better from fighting games. and especially Capcom.
This is the problem with fighting game fans. You guys are all already making excuses. Don't do that. Demand that the fighting games you play are better. KI in 2013 had netcode that's incredibly good. Why is it that not every fighting game company on the planet since then has said that is a solved solution? When GGPO came out, why didn't people think to themselves, that is solved?
Street Fighter V had in-house rollback netcode, but the implementation was really bad. So bad, in fact, that the fighting game community once again took it upon themselves to fix it. In 2020, a fan patch by user Altimore corrected one of the issues with the netcode that had persisted for 4 years and then made it available to download. Fan reception was positive. Meanwhile, Capcom's poorly implemented version of the same fix improved things, but just barely. In many ways, the fighting game community's patience with Capcom and Street Fighter V had run out, and the company was out of time. Over the years, Street Fighter V had become a good fighting game offline, but with the pandemic upon us, suddenly online play was the only option, including for Capcom Pro Tour events. And it was a terrible one.
Oh! Spectating has been halted, what do you mean?
Do you have any thoughts about how you are gonna prepare for that kind of extremely talent-dense tournament again?
Nah, I'm gonna just play Guilty Gear. I don't like the lag, so I'm not gonna force myself to play. I love the game.
Yeah.
The game is amazing, but the online is just not good, and it just tilts me to, I'm sure y'all know I'm sure everyone sees my tweets all the time, so.
I can't say I have a lot of sympathy, you know, if I'm honest with you. People are like, uh-oh, what's gonna happen to Punk? The difference is, you know, they don't hire Punk. The funny thing is that a lot of people know that I don't do CPT events anymore because Capcom is grumpy about me talking about the netcode or saying, hey, you guys probably should have an LCQ for Capcom Cup, you know?
But the story has a happy ending, as you already know. Capcom did the right thing, and hopefully led the way for innumerable fighting games to come. Frankly, it's hard to imagine two games more different at launch than Street Fighters 5 and 6. 5 had almost no single-player offering. 6 has a full open-world experience that eases you into fighting games. In fact, everything about the game is just better, including, thankfully, the netcode.
The netcode was very, very good. I played people from Mexico, UK. Those were 3-bar connections according to the game, but I really did not notice an issue.
If anyone had told me that was a like a US match versus Europe, I would not have believed it.
We have a new Street Fighter game that has both well-implemented rollback netcode and a robust and easy lobby system. It's about damn time. But it's also more critical than ever because we have a new generation of players who want to grind online. And we now know Tekken 8 is going to have rollback, though obviously we still need to see how it actually works. The future looks brighter than ever for fighting games, and Tony Cannon isn't done building it yet. He and his brother Tom are both part of the development team for Project L, Riot Games' upcoming tag fighter. So yeah, this is a victory for fighting games, but it's important for developers to realize that this is only the beginning. Sajam, who got back into Capcom's good graces in time for Street Fighter 6, was right. We shouldn't accept less.
You should ask for so much better than that. You're a human being. Why the f would you waste your time making excuses for people who are selling you a product that should be better than that?
How do you guys feel about those? I can't.
That was good.
I can't judge my own acting. So. All right.
I mean, you know, this is a Hollywood thing.
Wow. Thanks for the vote of confidence. I appreciate it.